and I get an alert on my phone, kind of like an Amber Alert, that says Iran has fired ballistic missiles. They'll be arriving in the next 5 to 7 minutes. Everyone in the country go to a shelter.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to The Narrative. Mike Andrews, David Mahan joining you this week. No Aaron Bear. And David, you get to step into the closet as we introduce our listeners to last week.
That's how we're going to kick it off?
Well, what else would you call this space?
This is legit a closet. It once housed our tables and chairs.
That is fair. We had to just tell everybody off the rip, like, we might hear construction noises in here for the next few months. We can't control this.
It's a weird pipe noise. Samantha keeps looking at me funny, but I think it's the pipe gas.
Is that what you're going with too? Well, it's going to be an adventure for sure, but we're glad we've got a setup that we can continue to bring you the podcast every week. And what a week this was. Really, what a day Monday was. Like, Monday in and of itself, you could put in a vacuum as kind of a banner day, starting with the inauguration of President Trump and J.D. Vance.
Wow.
And I don't even know where to start with. There were so many things that happened as part of the inauguration and his speech and all that. So I'm just going to let you rip, David. What did you see as you watched the inauguration on Monday?
I was so taken aback. I've been asking a lot of folks, like, what did you think about it? Our whole policy meeting a couple of days ago was just about what we thought about the inauguration. I mean, the tone and vibe of President Trump was impressive to me. I mean, it was like Teflon Don is back, and we got business to take care of starting now, right? And you've got Biden in the background, you've got Harris in the background, Obama's in the background, and it really didn't seem vindictive. But I mean, he said they tried to shoot, they tried to kill me, they tried to put me in jail, and here we are. And he was talking about divine providence. Now, I'm going to say this, like, most of the folks in the audience know I'm not like your uber MAGA guy. I love what he's doing in office, but I'm not one to idolize anybody, right? But so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I thought that was definitely the greatest presidential speech I've ever heard.
Wow.
Just because, and I told my wife, we were both watching this together, in the first probably 2 minutes of the speech, I looked across at her and I said, baby, whether you like him or not, Democrat or Republican, everybody knows that what he just said, he's about to do.
Yep.
And that's what impresses me about him, is that there's no doubt, whether you like it or not, he's going to do what he said he's going to do.
Yeah, and especially here at the start of the second term, with the way that it's gone, of being voted out of office and now voted back in, it seemed like he had a pretty clear mandate through the vote totals of, go enact what you're talking about.
That's right.
And with only 4 years to do it, it doesn't seem like he's wasted any time.
And you feel that clock, right? Yeah. Like it's really 2 years to kind of do it. And he started, day one was when he got elected. He started cleaning up stuff. They stopped tearing up stuff in the Red Sea. Iran started throwing their proxies under the bus. It's like it just began immediately. And you started feeling this vibe of encouragement, right? And hope. That all the hope is in him. It's just that we've got sanity at the helm again. Like, there's somebody steering the ship that knows where we're going. It was a weird feeling for me.
Yeah, for sure. And just the basic sanity that's at the helm now is being able to distinguish between male and female, which was one of the executive orders among several that the president has signed here, 72 hours into his
that was
administration.
Surreal that we had to have a president of the United States spend a piece of his time talking about how, there are two sexes, right? And that's a delineation I wanted to kind of bring up, because it's like, are you putting all your hope in Trump? It's not just Trump. There's an entire administration. There are folks. When he said that there are only two genders, my first thought was, it's not really genders, it's sex. There's only two sexes. And when I looked at the actual language of the order, it does say that there's two sexes. So what we're going to be seeing in terms of reforms and cleaning this mess up is not just coming from him. It's coming from people probably a whole lot smarter than he is, and he admits that. I mean, one of my favorite pieces of this whole thing is when he's signing executive orders. There's like 200 and some of them. And he's not in there trying to act like he knows what's going on. He's like, hey, do y'all know what's in here? Like, are we good with this? Somebody's like, hey, Trump, what are we going to do with all the drones just flying around everywhere and nobody seems to know? He was like, I don't know. But you know what? That's a good question. Hey, you need to find out what's going on with them drones. And I mean, like, today. And he's just signing these papers, man. It's just like it's the Teflon Don. And he's gonna get this work done, businessman style.
Yeah. It was quite the whirlwind from period of inactivity and who's really in charge? And as you said, David, no doubt, there's no doubt who's in charge right now.
And he's gonna clean it up, like you said with the gender stuff. DeWine a couple years ago said that you can change your gender on your birth certificate. That got cleaned up with an executive order. Playing in sports and just all the agency level things that are going on is just being cleaned up. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't need to pass good legislation, right? We can't just codify that language in our laws. We got to go a little deeper than that, but we can bring in some of that language into some of the legislation that we are working on here in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot to talk about with the Trump presidency, obviously, but the start has been impressive so far. Another impressive start this past week was from our Ohio State Buckeyes in the national championship game as they ran out to a big lead and then had to hold on. I'm sure you are, being the dedicated sports fan you are, David, I'm sure that you were watching in rapt attention.
I got to admit, I didn't watch the game, and really for the last 3 years. You all have messed me up on Ohio State. I mean, I can't do it. I mean, when I'm fighting them on Save Women's Sports and I'm fighting them on shutting down these pediatric sex change facilities, it's hard for me to like, ooh, yay, Ohio State, and waste 2 years or 2 hours of my life with these guys. But I do wish, having seen some of the replays of that game, I wish I'd have seen that game. I mean, those boys played some football.
Yeah, it was impressive.
It took me back to the years before Neil, right? Name, image, likeness, when everybody was a star getting paid for being a star and not a teammate. They played ball. The heart was in it. And, I know everybody wants to kind of, clown me because, well, you don't like sports. But I am a Buckeye fan, and I regret that I didn't watch that one.
Well, I think the thing that stood out most to me, beyond the performance on the field, is, and I always want to be careful with college kids, and I'm grateful for the testimony and the way that they have shared Christ. Yeah, I don't want to idolize them. They're also still very young kids, new in their faith. But the fact that they consistently throughout this playoff run, anytime they had a chance to give glory and honor to Jesus Christ, they did. That's right. It is something that is in their DNA. And I think even more than them talking about it, they did it so much. They forced Scott Van Pelt and Reese Davis in the post-game show to spend 2-3 minutes talking about Jesus on SportsCenter.
That's crazy.
Who thought we would have seen that in this day and age?
That's right. That's amazing. I don't know why they couldn't pray to beat Michigan, but
come on now.
Apparently nobody thought to pray about that. But it is powerful to watch those guys have such a great witness, and all throughout the season and after. Yeah. Right. They could have grabbed all the glory from doing just an amazing job out there during the national championship, but they even there gave consistent praise and glory to God.
Yeah, and I think what stood out most too about that SportsCenter interaction between Scott Van Pelt and Reese Davis was that they were very clear. Like, they didn't do this in order to guarantee an outcome, but because they did this, because they bought into what the Bible says about unity, they played differently because they put their brothers on the team ahead of their own interests. Yeah. And I think to your point about how they actually played in the game, David, even that was evident that there was this selflessness about the way that they approached the game, and it's not too difficult to connect the dots that it came from their faith.
I was watching a lot of the guys. It really just throughout the season, I was watching clips of these guys, and you could tell that some of these guys that were testifying of their experience, and they're really just a couple months walk with the Lord that they clearly really don't know a whole lot of. Like, you can tell they've not been in a lot of church services. They don't know the lingo. And some of the stuff they said was, probably not, it was a little extra biblical, but even that blessed me, right? Because the witness of their teammates was such that, man, I don't really know him, but what I'm seeing in you and what I'm seeing happen in this team and what I'm seeing happen to me, man, I want to know him. Yeah. That was evident.
May that be true of all of us.
That's right.
Last thing we want to touch on here is just some happenings across the street at the State House. I know we didn't have you here last week, but a new General Assembly is underway. We've got committee assignments and all that kind of stuff. So just some general thoughts as we get set to kick off the new GA across the street, David.
Well, Trump is not the only one getting busy. I mean, the Senate is getting busy. The House, wow, they've got some new committees we're excited to look at. Just last week, I think on the 14th, Speaker Huffman, did a press conference and he was talking about all the new committees and things that are out there. The order that's going to be, the new order that's going to be brought to the House. It was just a hot mess for the last couple of years. But really excited. Just an amazing vibe over there. I had a couple, one guy was in leadership, one guy was a chairman, called me yesterday, just excited, like telling me what they wanted to do, but then asking us, hey, what do you guys want us to do? I'm like, it's just unheard of. Folks are ready to get to work. They're coming back from some of their retreats, where they kind of go and get on the same page. They probably came back early because everywhere else is as cold as Ohio is anyway.
Yeah, snowing in Florida.
That's insane. I'm heading that way tomorrow, and I'm like, wow, like 40? Like, seriously?
You picked a bad time.
Yeah, but we are excited in the not just the leadership team. We've got strong connections with leadership, but also the committee chairs. I would say I'm about 85% pleased in Huffman's picks for committee chairs in the House, and just it's going to be an exciting year.
Yeah, that's great. Well, again, we'll keep you updated here on the narrative throughout the year as stuff moves across the street and as we've got priority bills that we want to discuss and inform you on, so be sure to keep tuning in. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Michael Mistretta. Great conversation with him, David. We spoke with him about 15 months ago, right after the October 7th attacks, and by God's providence, we get to talk to him again today here with a ceasefire recently announced, so it's a great conversation to help understand what's going on now, what's been going on, and what's ahead for the people of Israel. So you won't want to miss it. Stay tuned to The Narrative. Hey, Narrative listeners. Christians in the marketplace today face more unique and challenging threats than ever before. Businesses are following woke capitalism, chambers of commerce are beholden to social justice, and secular activists are chipping away Christians' First Amendment rights. As Ohio's only Christian Chamber of Commerce, the Christian Business Partnership stands in the gap to advocate for, to educate, and to celebrate Christian business owners. Joining the partnership also allows businesses to provide their employees with healthcare insurance, workers' compensation, and exclusive banking and educational discounts. To find out more and to join, go to cbpohio.org. That's cbpohio.org. And we're back on The Narrative. Mike Andrews and David Mahan are joined now by Michael Mistretta, who's the co-founder and CEO of FIRM, which stands for Fellowship of Israel Related Ministries. Michael was born in Canada, where he was raised in the church, and later received a call to Israel, where he met Pastor Wayne Hilsden and helped to start FIRM. Michael and his wife Vanessa have a passion for Israel that takes them around the world as they strive to build unique connections between the church and the body of believers in Israel, and share about how God is moving in Israel today. Michael and his wife Vanessa live in the heart of Jerusalem with their two sons. And Michael, it is great to welcome you back to The Narrative today. Thanks so much for your time.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me back. And it's amazing that I think it's been about 15 months since we last connected, but a lot has happened.
Yeah, for sure. We had the opportunity to speak with you shortly after the October 7th attacks, and you gave us kind of an overview of what life was like in the immediate aftermath of those attacks in Israel. And now here we are on the other side of it. We've got news of the ceasefire that seems like the agreement is in place, and want to talk about that, but also just give us kind of an overview to start of what these 15 months have been like living in Israel while the conflict was raging.
Yeah, we went from complete shock and, not expecting to be thrust into this conflict to the last 15 months that have been the most uncertain tumultuous, emotional period for many of us in our lives. It wasn't just a war with Hamas in Gaza, but it turned into a seven-front war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Syria firing rockets, Iraq, also in the West Bank, several terrorist attacks happening there, and then also Yemen. So you're faced with war on all these fronts, and then also Iran directly attacking Israel twice in the last year, which again, now it's a normal thing, but just 12 months ago, that was unprecedented. That was a reality we never thought would happen. So it's been very uncertain. It's been very difficult. I would say there's been a lot of discouragement in the nation. The two goals of the war were to return the hostages and to eliminate Hamas from being in control in Gaza. And up until recently, it's felt like that neither of those goals really have been accomplished. Now we've added a third goal, returning the 60 to 80,000 residents who've been displaced from their homes in the north, on the northern border, also to their homes. And so it could be discouraging in the country just to kind of paint the picture. Imagine you're at work and or you're a small business owner, or maybe you're in school, and all of a sudden October 7th happens. You're called up into the military, the reserves. Hundreds of thousands of people in our country. We're talking about a significant percentage of our population, and many of the men and women, but many of the men have been away from their families for 300 of the last 450 days, serving maybe an hour or 2 hours away, many of them in harm's way. And then they come back and they have a week back with their family and they try to get some work done, and then they go back into the military. So it's a very uncertain and difficult and emotional. But now we have this news about a ceasefire, and I'll just be very honest. It's very controversial across this country. Everyone wants the hostages home, and so I think we're willing to live with anything at this point. But what many people don't understand about this ceasefire is that for every one hostage they return, we release 30 Palestinian prisoners and terrorists, some even murderers that have been serving life sentences in jails. And for every one Israeli soldier they release, they're going to release hopefully a couple soldiers this Saturday. We have to trade 50 Palestinian prisoners and terrorists. So it's going to be about 2,000 people that we're trading to receive 33 hostages back that we don't even know if they're alive or dead. Hamas won't even confirm that. So you can imagine the families that lost a loved one finally, that saw justice by that person that murdered their loved one being put in prison. Now they're receiving notes from the government saying, we're releasing these convicted murderers that you thought were going to be in prison for the rest of their lives. We're releasing them into the West Bank, into Gaza, into East Jerusalem.
Yeah, Michael, what was it? Let me jump in real quick, because I was shocked when I heard that, and some of the folks. Well, the last time this happened, right? Some of those folks were the architect of what started this war in the first place, right? And so we're
exactly. And now you're really hitting on what the core of the issue is in our country. The last hostage deal, we traded 1,000 Palestinian prisoners and terrorists for one Israeli soldier who was held in Gaza, and one of those 1,000 terrorists that were released was Yahya Sinwar,
right,
who was the chief architect of October 7th and the leader of Hamas in Gaza until he was eliminated just a few months ago. So that's the question of the greater good. Yes, we want to save lives, but at what cost? And are we releasing the next Yahya Sinwar in the midst of this deal? It's an impossible decision to make. And personally, I believe that we have to do everything to get the hostages back at this point. It's been difficult for us. We've only rescued 8 hostages in the last 15 months. So this hostage deal is saving the lives of these hostages. But at the same time, it's with an unknown cost and price to pay. And you're exactly right to articulate. That's what's the tension in our country right now is.
And is there any sense that this is a permanent solution, aside from the standpoint of whether or not this is a good deal, Like, what's the
Yeah.
attitude around? Is this actually going to solve anything or give us some peace in the land right now?
Yeah, I'll be clear that I don't think a ceasefire is a solution always, because there hasn't been a plan proposed. Who's going to be in leadership in Gaza? Both the U.S. President Trump and also Netanyahu, vow that Hamas will not be in leadership in Gaza. So we failed from our goal of eliminating them, but it's hard to eliminate an ideology. It's almost impossible to eliminate an ideology. And I'll tell you, I have people, both believers and unbelievers, that everyone looked at me the day after the hostages were released this last Sunday, and they said it was so discouraging to see the ceasefire start, Hamas come out of their tunnels that they've been hiding in for 15 months, celebrating as if they won the war. The narrative had been for the last 15 months genocide, everything's wiped out. And then all of a sudden you see these well-fed army coming out of tunnels celebrating a victory that they've had over Israel. And so it's a psychological battle. It's very difficult. And so I don't know that we have a permanent solution yet. I think right now we're trying to get hostages out alive. I hope that we don't have to go back to fighting. But even I think President Trump said we're not sure that this ceasefire is gonna hold, because it doesn't come with solutions. It just comes with phases of de-escalation without any clarity about who really governs in Gaza. And so
Yeah.
I don't know I don't want to be pessimistic on that, but we're a far cry away from a real solution for who will lead and run Gaza.
Yeah, you bring up Trump, and I'm curious to hear from your perspective and the perspective of Israelis. What is the Trump, or at least the perception of the Trump effect?
Yeah.
We heard that the ceasefire deal was something, that Biden was the architect of that. Months ago he was the architect, and then just the night before the inauguration, we see
Yeah,
folks
exactly.
being released. So from your perspective there, what is the Trump effect, if any?
Yeah, so much of this war has, I think everything would have been different if this didn't happen during an election year. You could tell that even the weeks before the election, Iran and Israel were making different decisions based off not knowing who was going to be in charge. And you felt a shift happen after the first week of November when Trump won the election.
Mm.
And one of the biggest things is when Trump tweeted, or he put on Truth Social, that if the hostages are not released by the time I get in office on
Right.
January 20th, there will be all hell to pay.
Mhm.
That's a post that has reverberated, I would say, in every Israeli's conscious. In fact, there were massive LED signs in downtown Tel Aviv saying, all hell will be to pay if the hostages don't be released. And it was looking like we weren't going to meet that deadline. And of course it happened. And what's very interesting, if you actually listen to the hostage families, all of them thanked President Trump and
I
almost none
noticed
of them
that.
thanked President Biden. So, I mean, there was one that kind of mentioned Biden, but I think everyone knows and understand that Trump helped get this across the finish line.
Oh,
Obviously, the Biden administration did a lot of work, but really Trump kind of giving that ultimatum that really helped us get to where we are today, and we're grateful for that. I think everyone feels the support that's coming from America with President Trump in the office, and obviously, if Huckabee gets confirmed as the ambassador to Israel, that's very positive. Now, Senator Marco Rubio serving as Secretary of State. It's a very, very good alliance for us. Even the U.S. ambassador to the UN, very favorable for Israel. So we're feeling really good about our relationship with the U.S. in the coming years.
well, back to, kind of the bittersweet of all this. I was watching, when some of the hostages were released, and I heard some of that feedback from the families. It was beautiful to see, folks being reunited with their families and things like that. And that was a blessing. But then I heard that there was something like 90 hostages still, 90 folks being held hostage, and like 7 of those are Americans.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
true, or
It's
what's the
true.
plan
It's
there?
true. 94 hostages that are still being held. And that's just, there's 2 hostages they're still holding from 10 years ago. Okay. So 94 from October 7th that are in Gaza, and only another 30 that are supposed to be released in this current phase of the deal. And even of those 30, we expect maybe 10 of those are not alive. So that's incredibly emotional. Like we're supposed to have 4 women released on Saturday. We still don't know the names of them. We don't know if they're going to be alive. Two people don't know this, but 2 of the hostages on the list to be released are the youngest victims of October 7th. It was a 10-year-old boy named Kfir. Now he's hopefully, if he's still alive, he just celebrated his 2nd birthday. Both of his only birthdays ever celebrated have been in Gaza. And then his brother, who was 4 and is now 5, about to turn 6, Ariel, we're hopeful that they're alive, but we haven't heard any news. So it's this psychological warfare. Why are they releasing, 30-year-old women before they're releasing the 2-year-old toddler? It's a little bit preposterous. And there are still Americans, there's British citizens, there's Russian citizens, dual citizens that are still being held as hostages.
Michael, one thing that we didn't talk about because it hadn't happened yet the last time we spoke was as the war was going on in the Middle East, we saw this demonstration across campuses in the United States, pro-Palestine demonstrations and stuff like that really escalate. We saw a lot of really from coast to coast. We saw it everywhere taking place. As you're in the middle of this in Israel and seeing news of this happening in the States, what are you thinking? And tell us a little bit about your take on the ideology that was driving those pro-Palestinian protests.
Yeah, I think what October 7th and the ensuing war demonstrated was it accentuated something that was already there. October 7th didn't create anti-Semitism. It highlighted a root of anti-Semitism in hearts, not just in America, but around the world. There was just a study published just this week where they interviewed all across the world people to assess if there's anti-Semitic sentiment. And they found that 1 in 2 people had anti-Semitic sentiment. And this was not just on one identifier. There were at least a minimum of 6 baseline identifiers. And they factored in anti-Israeli sentiment, and they tried to weed that out and just get to like true anti-Semitism, whether it's thoughts or opinions about Jews and Jewish people. And it's pervasive. And so we've seen that on the college campuses. We've seen that in the protests. We've seen that in people that are chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which many people don't even understand is calling for the annihilation of every Israeli. So it's not surprising, but I would say if you want to know what the sense is in Israel, the feeling is we're alone in the world. No one loves us. We are alone. And if we don't protect ourselves, no one will. And that's where it's very encouraging when you have President Trump, when you have Americans, and when you have a large number of Christians around the world that are saying, we're with you, we're standing with you. That's one of the miracles we've seen during this war. You had Israelis and Jews that had never before even met a Christian saying, why would you come here and serve? Why would you give financially? Why would you stand with us? We thought we were alone in the world. And that's why a friendship with Israel and Jewish people is more important now than ever, because Jewish people are feeling more alone now than ever. And for us to take a stand really makes a difference at this time.
And just in terms of the work that you do with Firm, Michael, your goal is to see Israel thrive and people coming to know Jesus as the Messiah. What has the environment been like for your work and for proclaiming the gospel in the midst of the conflict and war that was going on?
Yeah, it's been incredible to see the openness. And if I could just describe it this way, I would say our nation was shaken after October 7th. Everything we put our faith in, our government, our military, our intelligence was shaken. And people's faith in God was shaken. And so when you're one as a body, we were able to come together, not just our organization, but the 75 different organizations we serve and more. And we were able to disproportionately be a light and a voice of hope and healing in the midst of a dark situation. Only because it's not just the less than 1% of us that believe in Jesus here in the country, but we were holding hands with hundreds of millions of Christians, evangelical Christians all around the world. And so what that's done is it's caused us to have relationships with people that never before would have worked with us, mayors and government officials and communities. We've built trauma centers and schools and protective classrooms. We're rebuilding homes up north, all in the name of Jesus. and as Jewish people that believe in Jesus and Yeshua, and that's now opened up the door for relationships. So we've seen people come to faith, and we've seen people asking questions because they say, how do you have hope in the midst of uncertainty? Our faith was in our government, our faith was in our Mossad, our faith was in our intelligence. And now that's all gone away. And so when there's a time of shaking, when there's real relationships with people that are filled with the Spirit of God, that love the Lord and have an anchor of hope, we're able to provide that hope in an amazing way. So we've seen unprecedented growth and more expansion in terms of reaching people. And I think that's going to continue. I think, honestly, we've seen the name of Jesus really be destigmatized in some of these communities that have never before worked with a Jewish believer in Jesus or a Christian before.
I that's a blessing. And we probably have to put a piece of that after this question here, Michael. But I wanted, could you help us? What is the relationship with Iran and some of these proxies, right? Like I know, Hezbollah, in Gaza, we talk a lot about, but then like the Red Sea has calmed down a little bit, right? Since Trump, everybody knew Trump was going to be the guy. Is the funding still going from Iran to the Houthis and all? I mean, what is that relationship? Because it would seem to me that with Trump being in there, Iran would want to slow down supporting some of these guys and start throwing these guys under the bus. What are you seeing and hearing over there?
Yeah, what's important to understand is obviously Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism. And what Iran has done is tried to surround Israel with terrorist groups. Their crown jewel, not all terrorist groups are created equally, their crown jewel was Hezbollah. It was the most funded financially, the most advanced kinds of weapons. Just to give you a perspective, I talked firsthand to a commander that was going into southern Lebanon and raiding these civilian homes where they were finding Hezbollah weapons. And they said, Michael, just to put it in perspective, in all of Gaza, we only found 12 of these really, really highly advanced RPGs. In the whole state of Gaza, we found 12. And they said, we found 12 in the first home we went into in southern Lebanon. And there was another home next door and another one and another one, another one. So the quantity and the quality of weapons, it really can't even really be fathomed. And so by Israel dismantling Hezbollah's leadership and a lot of their, eliminating a lot of their rocket supply, they had 150,000 rockets at the beginning of this war. And they fired about 30,000 on Israel, but their supply is now down to under 15 or 20,000. We've destroyed so much of their missile factories. Now Syria has totally gone from being an Iran-friendly regime, and prayerfully, and the head of Qatar yesterday said that we should be cautiously optimistic about the new leaders in Syria, and so we're being cautiously optimistic.
They had a revolution,
Yeah, with the revolution and the Assad regime being out, that's a big deal. I don't know if you heard the report, really unprecedented. We had 120 Israeli commandos that did a secret mission in September in Syria to a missile production factory where they had to land on the ground and go into the mountain to destroy this factory. They did the whole operation without anyone getting injured or hurt. It was just declassified. Just incredible military feats that happened, eliminating the head of Hezbollah and the head of Hamas. And so it has weakened Iran significantly. But what it also has done is it scares Iran because Hezbollah was holding a gun against Israel's head all this time as kind of a defense mechanism for Iran. Now Iran doesn't really have a strong defense proxy, and a lot of their air defenses have been wiped out since our last retaliation to their attack. So we're in a different situation. At the same time, the Houthis have a lot more firepower than we expected. I'm sitting in a home right now in the Judean Hills. It's literally the flight path where the Houthi missiles, ballistic missiles, fly over our home when they head to Tel Aviv. And almost every time we shoot down a missile, we wake up in the morning and somewhere 100 to 200 meters from our home, we see giant missile debris that falls on homes and backyards. I mean, that happens literally right down the street from where we are. So the Houthis are very much a factor. It's important to note, in the last month, we've probably had 15 to 20 nights, right? 3 a.m, everyone in the country has to run to their bomb shelter because there's a ballistic missile fired. So I don't want to underemphasize that the proxies still do have some power, but we don't know what's going to happen now that President Trump's in power. I think maybe there'll be a little more cautious and leery, knowing that maybe the U.S. will be more willing to retaliate, where in the past they haven't been quite so willing.
Hearing you talk about the missiles being shot down and the debris that's so close to your home, I'm just wondering from a personal perspective, Michael, being a husband and a dad in that type of environment, what does that do to you?
Yeah, it's very difficult to talk. Our sons are 4 and 2, right? So our 4-year-old now, he understands. He hears a siren. He'll hear a fire truck on the street and say, "Oh, we got to run to a shelter. We got to run to shelter." And the one thing I'll comment about this is during the last Iran attack, which was on October 1st. I was at the office and I saw the news where the U.S. had informed Israel that an Iran attack was imminent. Now, you have to understand, we were expecting an attack for about 2 months, so we kind of rolled our eyes a little bit. But I was at the office and I thought, you know what, I should come home early just in case they attack. And I thought we'd have a lot of notice before there was an attack. I stopped to pick up some dinner and I'm driving home and I get an alert on my phone, kind of like an Amber Alert, that says Iran has fired ballistic missiles. They'll be arriving in the next 5 to 7 minutes. Everyone in the country go to a shelter. And so I get on the phone. I'm driving. I'm still about 7 minutes away from the house. And I'm driving and I call my wife. She doesn't answer. I end up calling my mother, who gets my wife on the phone. I said, "Get to a bomb shelter now." She's literally bathing our son in the bath. She has to rinse him off and grab him naked out of the bathroom with a towel and run down to the shelter. And I was trying to get home before the attack, and I wasn't able to. I got stopped at a checkpoint where everyone got out of their car. We started running, hearing sirens everywhere, and had to take shelter with about 50 other people in a small shelter. I didn't have a good view there, so I actually left the shelter and stood outside, and you could see these ballistic missiles raining down overhead. And I kind of waited out things there, and I wanted to get home. And my wife said, "Maybe you should stay." And I said, "No, let me get home. I'm only 3 minutes away." So I got in the car, started to drive, and there was another round of attacks. And I'm seeing the Iron Dome firing up in front of me and the missiles from Iran over my head. And that does something. I ended up walking into the bomb shelter, and our sons were worried. Where's Abba? Like he's out. We're saying he's safe, but we're hearing the sirens. Is he okay? So it puts a lot of strain on the family, and learning how to talk to your young people about it. We have a generation of young people that really have to find healing from just the trauma of always having to be minutes and seconds away from a shelter.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff.
It's a crazy reality, and the most crazy part is that it's kind of become normal. Like it's become normal to expect. Oh, I got to wake up at 3 a.m. and run to the shelter and then go back to sleep. Like that's become a normal reality, and that's not the stuff that you don't always hear in the headlines. It's only in the headlines when our defense mechanisms don't work and people die. But when it's successful, it's hard to imagine what it's really like to live through this reality.
Well, I know nobody can predict the future. Thankfully, we know who holds the future in our Savior Jesus. But just you've touched on it a little bit with the ceasefire and stuff like that. But overall, can you give us an outlook for Israel, kind of where you see things may be headed, or just the general sense of where things may be headed?
Yeah, so I would hope that, again, our hope and our prayer is that the ceasefire continues, that we're able to get all of our hostages back. But there's a real plan put forth for what a post October 7th Gaza looks like. There's a lot of work needs to be done on rebuilding there. And really, I think what it's going to come down to is how closely the U.S. and Israel work together and some of the responses happening from Iran. So, for example, if President Trump's able to push forward the Abraham Accord agenda, and if we are able to have normalization with Saudi Arabia, that would be a big a move in a positive direction. They have said they want a pathway to a Palestinian state in order to have normalization with Israel, and Israel said that's not really on the table. So we'll see where that goes if we're able to negotiate through that. If Iran continues to show aggression, I think the U.S. and Israel now under new leadership in the U.S., there's more likelihood that we will be able to retaliate on their nuclear facilities. And there's what's not known for sure. And again, I don't want to paint panic at all, but what's unknown is Iran has taken such a heavy hit on their proxies. if they decide that they're not safe and they make a play for a nuclear bomb, that changes the dynamic. Now, maybe they won't do that because they know President Trump's in the White House and Israel's willing to move forward on it. So again, we don't know. I would watch closely in the coming days and weeks not just what's happening in Gaza, but what's happening between the Iranian proxies and Israel, and how Iran chooses to respond to Trump being in the White House, if there's more sanctions put on Iran. And they may be forced into a position where they make a play for a nuclear weapon. And I think under the current alliance between the U.S. and Israel, we would definitely respond strongly at that point. So little to be known what will escalate. I hope it doesn't escalate more. But that's only going to happen if we get the hostages back. And we have a lot of rebuilding to do in the country now. One of the things we're very focused on is helping to get these families back home in the north. And that would be a huge prayer point for normalcy to be returned and for Hezbollah to de-escalate as things proceed.
I'm glad you kind of brought that up. We do want to land the plane on prayer for that folks could be praying for Israel. But in terms of the Gazans, right, the Palestinian refugees, they really don't have anywhere to go home to, right? And so,
Yeah.
I heard word some of them may go to Egypt. I heard some of them may go as far as Indonesia. What is in the plan for them? I mean, because I feel like we do need to add them to the prayer list, right? Not everybody's a soldier over there.
Of course we do. And this is on our
right,
heart
children.
as well. We're supposed to love our neighbor. So I would say, countries are now starting to pledge budgets towards rebuilding Gaza. The real prayer is that not just the money is committed, but that there's leaders in place that don't corrupt or steal the money to use it for fraudulent purposes. So if the money comes and it's used to rebuild tunnels and rebuild rockets and doesn't go to the people, that's an issue. And so it's really prayer for wisdom and who's going to lead Gaza. The hope would be that Hamas has been weakened enough. They probably will still exist as a faction within Gaza, but that their influence will have waned, and that there will be real leadership in Gaza that's able to help with the rebuilding process. That there would be not a tolerance for a society around terror. And really, one of our big prayer points is just this is only going to be solved if there's a solution in the education process going forward. Like if the 4 and 5 and 6-year-old Gazans today just grow up to hate Israel and want to kill Jews. And also, if Jewish Israelis grow up and hate Palestinians and want to, think every Arab is a terrorist, we're going to just perpetuate the cycle of hatred generation after generation. So it's really healing from that wound and proper education that will allow us to change over the long haul.
You mentioned a couple of prayer points, Michael. What else can we be praying for from over here halfway across the world? Or what action steps could we take to show our support for Israel?
Yeah, I would say, one of the things we've noticed is that after October 7th, people became more polarized. Like if Jews and Arabs were willing to work together in the past, they kind of stopped being willing to work together. The only place Jews and Arabs are really working together in Israel and in the Middle East right now is in the body of believers, the people that believe in Jesus. So we have a real opportunity to model what the words of Jesus instruct us to, and also the words of Paul saying, you've been entrusted with this message of reconciliation, being able to walk together. And so my prayer is that we're actually able to demonstrate what this unity and peace and reconciliation looks like practically. I mean, I've seen it firsthand with Christian Arabs coming to serve Jewish unbelievers that are on army bases. And they're like, what the heck? Why are you're an Arab? Why would you serve me? And there's an opportunity to share about the Messiah and what he's done to transform our hearts and lives, to create a love inside the heart of Arabs for the Jewish people. So that I would say that would be a huge prayer point, is that we would reflect the peace that we want to see, and that God would continue to work through this situation, and the hope that has been shaken in a lot of people to really shine his light. And we know that at the end of the day, it's a spiritual condition. It's an issue that can only be solved in the hearts of men. And our prayer is that his light continues to shine, and that there's a silver lining in the midst of all this. Isaiah 61 says that he wants to trade for Zion her mourning, her ashes for beauty. That's been the prayer of our year, really, is God, would you exchange this mourning and these ashes and turn it into something beautiful that's going to bring peace in the long run, and a true and lasting peace, not a bandage peace, not something that just makes great headlines, but a true and lasting peace that permeates hearts and minds and eliminates a cycle of hatred.
And specific to your work with Firm, Michael, how can we keep tabs on what you've got going on and support your work?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. We try to give a lot of updates on what's happening in the believing body across the country. Like I said, we serve over 75 different ministries. So for anyone who wants to stay updated, you can just check us out on firmisrael.org. It's FIRM Israel.org. We have regular updates and videos, and there are specific ministries and initiatives you could be praying over as well, and find different ways of getting involved. We have volunteers also coming out to help serve and rebuild and restore. So if you want to get involved and know more, it's Firm Israel, also on all the social platforms, Instagram, X, Facebook, Firm Israel, and you can find more resources there.
Well, it has been great chatting with you, Michael. It's we've been praying for you, and it's good to get the update on what's going on in the country. You have our continued prayers, and we thank you so much for joining us today on The Narrative. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Bear, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.